During the First World War, Germany invaded Belgium in August of 1914, and although the Germans initially smashed through the country, the Western Front had stabilized by the end of the year with static trench warfare. Following the Battle of Ypres from October 16th to the 31st, the Belgian army was left with a number of armored cars, which were not useful on the Western Front because, mud, trenches against wheels. Meanwhile, in early of 1915, the Russian Tsar Nicholas II formally requested military support from King Albert I of Belgium, and a self-contained unit was formed for service in Russia. In Galicia, modern-day Ukraine, large Russian armies were on the move, unlike the Western Front, and King Albert decided to put his armored car corps at the Tsar's disposal. As Belgium was officially an independent neutral power rather than an ally of the Russian Empire at this time, Belgian soldiers in the unit were officially considered volunteers in the Imperial Russian Army itself. On September 22, 1915, the Belgian Armored Car Expeditionary Corps embarked at Brest on the British steamer Ray Castle for Archangel, where they docked on October 13th. They moved to Peterhof, which was 20 kilometers west of Petrograd, where they stayed until January 11, 1916. The Tsar inspected the corps on December 6, 1915, and the severe Russian winter meant that the Belgians had to change their Parisian uniforms for Russian sheepskin coats and hats to keep warm. By way of Petrograd, they were sent to Galicia, where they mainly saw action against the Austro-Hungarian military. The Belgian armored cars came to be known as an effective machine gun destroyer group. They were mentioned 5 times in the Russian order of the day during their time in Galicia. The Expeditionary Corps would also fight in the Brusilov offensive against the Central Powers, as well as the Kerensky offensive. The expedition continued fighting after the Russian Revolution began until the signing of the Brest-Litovsk Treaty. With the Russian Revolution in its early stages in the beginning of 1917, the Tsar abdicated and the Kerensky government decided that a new offensive was needed in which the armored cars participated in, and this would be the disastrous Kerensky offensive. From July of 1917, the collapse of the Russian army spread, but the Belgians kept fighting for the White Russians as long as they could. The expedition decided that it was time to head home with all of this internal turmoil in Russia following the revolution. However, it proved to be a very difficult task for them to obtain the necessary authorizations to depart from the Soviets. Rather than having given up their vehicles and armaments to the Bolsheviks, they destroyed their armored cars and hid their weapons in stores before taking them with them. The Bolsheviks were gaining control and projected northern route to Murmansk as a non-option to the armored car unit. Thus, the Belgians then decided to head east via the Trans-Siberian Railroad to Vladivostok. The convoy reached China on March 27, 1918, and after being threatened with armed conflict, they eventually surrendered their guns to the Bolsheviks. The Belgian armored car force was recalled by the Belgian government, but had a difficult time returning home, as you can imagine. The trip back to Archangel was unfeasible, and the Belgians, much like the Czechoslovak Legion, followed the Trans-Siberian Railroad, crossed northern China, and ultimately arrived in Vladivostok. On April 18, 1918, they boarded the American vessel SS Sheridan and sailed to San Francisco. From there, they traveled on a much-acclaimed and widely publicized trip through the United States and sailed from New York on June 15, 1918, to finally reach Paris 2 weeks later. Notable members of the Belgian Armored Car Expeditionary Corps include Henri Erd, known as Constant Lemarine, who was a prominent wrestler and 4-time world champion, Henri Georget, a track cyclist who won a gold medal at the 1920 Summer Olympics. Next was Julien Lahaut, who would lead strikes against the Nazi occupation of Belgium in World War II, and he would survive the Holocaust to become a politician and later the head of the Communist Party of Belgium from 1945 to 1950 until his assassination. Next was Marcel Thurdy, a poet and author who served in the Corps with his brother Oscar. Theo Aulux was a construction contractor who built the first high multi-story buildings in Liège. The last member of the Belgian Expeditionary Corps in Russia would end up dying in 1992. When it first set sail for Russia, the Belgian Armored Car Force numbered 333 Belgians who were all volunteers. In Russia, 33 Russians would join their ranks, and counting reinforcements and replacements, 444 Belgians passed through the ranks. There were 58 vehicles, of which 12 were armored cars, plus 23 motorcycles and 120 bicycles. 16 Belgians would be killed in action in Russia. Only 1 armored car was lost in combat, being captured by German forces, and it is said to have been used in Berlin during the Spartacus uprisings of 1919. Did you know about the Belgian